What if the only thing standing between you and the life you actually want is 8 invisible beliefs you don't even realize you're carrying? Beliefs that convince you comfort is safer than growth, that being busy means you're making progress, and that opportunity is limited to the lucky few. These lies are why most people stay stuck, broke, and bitter. But the ones who break free, they think differently. They own their outcomes, use leverage instead of hustle, and create abundance instead of chasing scraps. Change these 8 beliefs, or keep living the life everyone else settles for. The choice is yours. Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. The world doesn't owe you stability. And the moment you believe it does, you've already lost. This idea, this belief that just by existing or working hard or being a good person, you'll be taken care of, is the exact thing that keeps people stuck, waiting, hoping, living in a loop of disappointment and frustration when life doesn't deliver on the promises they assumed were guaranteed. I've sat across tables from people who are incredibly smart, incredibly capable, but stuck. Why? Because deep down, they're still hoping someone else will come in and fix it for them. The boss will notice, the market will turn, the government will roll out a better policy, their partner will change. But here's the truth. No one is coming. No one is going to knock on your door with a better life in their hands. The cavalry isn't late. It doesn't exist. That realization can feel like a punch to the gut. And for a second, you might feel angry, maybe even helpless. But then, if you're awake, something else kicks in, power. Because once you accept that it's on you fully and completely, you stop outsourcing your future. You stop waiting for permission. You stop blaming. You start building. People think freedom is handed out, but freedom is earned. It's built by people who take radical ownership of their time, money, decisions, and consequences. And the irony is, the moment you stop expecting stability from others, you begin to create real, lasting stability for yourself. Think about it. Most people spend years trying to create a stable life by attaching themselves to supposedly secure things: a job, a salary, a routine, a title. But what happens when that job disappears? When the company restructures? When inflation hits? They panic because their version of stability was always built on something outside of themselves, something they couldn't control. Now compare that to someone who's taken full responsibility for their income, their skills, their assets. They've built multiple income streams. They've learned how to negotiate, sell, market, and invest. When the world shifts, they shift with it. They don't fear the change, they capitalize on it because their foundation is internal. It's not the system, it's them. And I get it, ownership is scary at first. It means everything is your fault, your finances, your choices, your results. But it also means everything is your opportunity. You get to change it. You get to evolve. You get to create something different. That's the trade-off. You stop being a victim and you start being a creator. And here's where most people miss the point. They hear all this and think, so what, I just hustle harder? No. This isn't about grinding. It's about rewiring the way you think about control. You can't control the economy, but you can control how you respond to it. You can't control whether your boss likes you, but you can control whether you build something that makes that irrelevant. You can't control what happens tomorrow, but you can absolutely control whether you're prepared. Ownership doesn't mean you do everything alone. It means you no longer wait for someone else to fix it. It means you build a life that can't be taken from you just because someone else changed their mind or pulled a rug out from under you. You stop playing defense, you go on offense. So ask yourself, where are you still waiting? Where are you hoping for rescue instead of building your escape? Because every minute you spend blaming or hoping or rationalizing is a minute you could be stacking skills, stacking cash, stacking leverage. Let everyone else keep chasing comfort, security, and stability from systems that were never designed to prioritize them. You build it yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice, belief by belief. That's how you stop staying stuck like everyone else, by becoming the person no one has to save. Everyone keeps telling you to hustle harder, work more hours, grind until your eyes bleed. And sure, in the beginning, maybe you need to put in the reps. Maybe you do need to burn the midnight oil. But what no one tells you is this: staying busy is one of the most dangerous traps out there. It feels productive. It looks like progress, but more often than not, busy is a form of laziness. It's comfort disguised as effort. Because if you're constantly in motion, you never have to stop and ask yourself the hard questions, like whether what you're doing is actually moving the needle. People stay stuck in busy because it gives them an excuse. If they fail, well, it wasn't for lack of trying, right? They were just overwhelmed. They had too much on their plate. But the truth is, motion isn't the same as progress. You can spin in circles forever and still be in the exact same place. And that's what happens to most people. They confuse effort with effectiveness. They run on autopilot, checking boxes, answering emails, going to meetings, doing what looks like work, but never actually building anything that compounds. The real currency of wealth isn't time, it's leverage. Leverage is what makes the rich richer and the smart unstoppable. And here's the kicker: the average person doesn't even think in terms of leverage because we've been conditioned since childhood to value hard work over smart work, to play it safe, to follow the rules. And when you follow the rules written for employees, you live a life designed by employers. But leverage, real leverage, is how you bend the rules entirely. It's when your time is no longer your only input. It's when you put something in motion, a business, a system, a piece of content, a product, and it keeps working long after you've stepped away. It's when 1 hour of thinking replaces 40 hours of grinding. That's the switch. That's the unlock. Not hustle, not more hours, but leverage. There are 4 types of leverage that matter: people, capital, code, and content. Use other people's time, hire, outsource, delegate. Use money, yours or someone else's, to buy time or assets. Use code, build or leverage software to scale your efforts. And use content, write, film, create something once that can be consumed 1,000,000 times. The internet has given us the most powerful form of leverage in human history, and yet most people are still stuck trading time for money like it's 1985. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they're afraid to let go of the grind. Hustling feels safe, it feels familiar, it keeps you in control. But control is often a form of self-sabotage because real growth requires letting go, hiring people smarter than you, automating processes, trusting systems, and most importantly, trusting yourself enough to think, to pause, to analyze, to build something that doesn't need you 24/7. Busy is reactive. Leverage is intentional. When you operate with leverage, you don't do things just to stay moving. You do things that move the system. You stop thinking in terms of, can I get this done? And start asking, how can I design this so it gets done without me? That one mindset shift will make or break your future. And let me be clear, this isn't about being passive. Leverage still requires work. It's just a different kind of work. Instead of doing, you're building machines that do. Instead of running faster, you're constructing engines that run without burning you out. You're architecting freedom, not renting it, 1 hour at a time. So the next time you feel busy, ask yourself, is this the kind of busy that builds freedom, or the kind that builds dependence? Are you moving toward autonomy or just decorating the cage you built? Because the world will praise you for hustling, for sacrificing, for grinding. But the truth, the people who escape the system aren't the ones who hustle hardest. They're the ones who build leverage and never look back. If you stay addicted to hustle, you'll never find freedom because you'll be too exhausted to build it. Most people live their lives waiting to be picked, waiting for a promotion, waiting for validation, waiting for someone to recognize their talent or give them a shot. And if you're honest with yourself, maybe you've done the same. Maybe you've had the skill, the drive, the vision, but you held back because no one gave you the green light. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. The people who win in this game aren't the ones who get chosen. They're the ones who choose themselves. Somewhere along the way, we were all conditioned to believe that success comes through permission. We were taught to wait for approval by teachers, by bosses, by investors, by followers. We learned to shrink ourselves into submission, to prove our worth through resumes, grades, and job titles. And that mindset, it's a trap. Because while you're waiting for someone to say you're ready, someone else is out there already building. And they're winning not because they're better, but because they stopped waiting. The new world doesn't reward potential, it rewards proof. And the good news is, proof is completely in your control. You want to start a business? You don't need an MBA. You need one client. You want to get investors? You don't need a pitch deck polished to perfection. You need revenue, traction, or even just a scrappy MVP that solves a real problem. You want to build a following or a brand or even a movement? You don't need a platform. You need to show up every day with something valuable and consistent. See, we used to live in a world of gatekeepers, but not anymore. The internet leveled the playing field. Distribution is free, capital is global, Credibility is built in public. So if you're still sitting on your hands waiting for someone to pick you, whether that's a boss, a publisher, a podcast network, or a board of directors, you're living in the past. Today, the question isn't who will let me, it's how will I show them? And this doesn't just apply to business, it's personal too. Think about the relationships you're in, the places you give your time and energy. If you're waiting for someone to finally see your value, to finally commit, to finally support you in the way you deserve, you're giving away your power. You don't need to be someone's backup plan while they figure themselves out. You need to walk like someone who already knows their worth and then act like it. That shift from permission to proof will change everything. When you stop asking and you start doing, you become undeniable. You build something real, and real can't be ignored. When you document your process, when you put your work in the world, when you help people, even when no one's watching, you're laying the foundation that can't be faked. Results don't lie. And yes, it might be slow at first. It might be messy. You'll put stuff out there and get crickets. You'll sell your product and only get one buyer. You'll post content that flops. That's normal. That's called learning. That's called building proof. But with every rep, you gain something most people never will: evidence. That you can do hard things, that you're the kind of person who follows through, that you don't need permission to be powerful. There's this moment that happens when you start stacking those little wins, and suddenly people start paying attention. The very people who wouldn't return your calls before, they're the ones reaching out now. The clients who weren't sure before, they're begging to work with you. The opportunities that seemed so far away, they're landing in your inbox. But here's the kicker: by the time they show up, you've already outgrown needing them. Because now you've got leverage. And leverage doesn't come from shouting about how good you are. It comes from showing up when no one's clapping. It comes from turning action into proof. That's how you stop being one of the many hoping to get picked, and you become the one who gets paid to choose. So if you're stuck, if you feel invisible, if you're wondering when your moment will come, I'll tell you. It'll come the day you stop waiting and start proving. Most people hear the word debt and immediately feel panic, like it's this four-letter word that ruins lives, destroys families, and locks you in a cycle of scarcity. And that's not entirely wrong if you're using debt the way the system wants you to. See, what we're never told, what no one ever breaks down, is that debt isn't the enemy. Ignorance is. It's not the credit card, the loan, or the interest rate that's holding you back. It's the belief that all debt is bad. That belief right there, that's what keeps people poor. Let's get real. The majority of people use debt to buy liabilities. They swipe the card to upgrade the car, finance the newest iPhone, or take a vacation they can't afford. And then they complain about being trapped, stressed, or behind. But here's the truth. The debt isn't the problem. It's the way you use it. It's like blaming the scalpel for a botched surgery when it was never about the tool, it was about the hand holding it. Meanwhile, the wealthy, the ones playing the game at a higher level, they're using debt completely differently. They take on strategic debt, smart debt, debt that buys assets, not things that rust, rot, or depreciate. They leverage capital to buy real estate that cash flows, to invest in businesses that scale, to acquire companies, or even create media that keeps paying them long after the work is done. That kind of debt is the fuel behind generational wealth. But no one teaches us that. We're taught to fear debt. We're taught to avoid risk. We're trained to follow rules that were designed to benefit the people who wrote them. So the average person stays stuck, terrified of borrowing $1, while the wealthy borrow millions to build empires and then get tax breaks for doing it. That's the disconnect. That's the mindset gap. Here's where the flip happens. The moment you stop seeing debt as this dangerous, evil thing and start seeing it as a tool, you unlock an entirely new level of freedom. But you've got to earn the right to use it well. You don't just jump into leveraging debt without education. That's what gets people into trouble. You start by understanding what an asset is. You start by learning how to calculate ROI. You study what cash flow really means. You get obsessed with turning borrowed dollars into income-producing machines. And if that sounds too advanced or complicated, that's exactly what they want you to think. Complexity is how they keep you out of the game. But it's not actually complicated, it's just unfamiliar. Think about it. You probably already understand how to pay down a student loan or a mortgage. You've already used debt, you just haven't used it to your advantage yet. Here's what most don't realize. Being debt-free doesn't make you rich. It makes you neutral. And while you're sitting at zero, someone else is building, someone else is scaling, someone else is buying up the world around you. The goal isn't to have no debt. The goal is to have productive debt, the kind that cash flows every month, the kind that grows your net worth, the kind that, even if it carries interest, pays you more than you pay it. That's the shift. That's the edge. But you have to kill the old belief that debt is evil, because that belief is what keeps you in the cycle of small thinking, of scarcity, of playing defense. When you flip that belief, when you look at capital and say, how can I put this to work? You go from consumer to owner, from worker to investor, from stuck to scalable. And look, you don't have to start with millions. You start with a few $1,000s. A small cash flowing deal, a service-based business you can buy with seller financing. You learn the game one strategic move at a time. You build proof, and eventually you earn the right to take on bigger risk, because now you've built a track record of smart moves. Fear keeps most people frozen, but fear is usually just a mask for ignorance. The moment you start understanding how money works, fear loses its grip. And in its place, clarity shows up, confidence shows up, capability shows up. That's what separates those who grow from those who grind. Because the truth is, money isn't just earned, it's created. And sometimes the creation starts with debt, not the kind that costs you, the kind that compounds for you. People love to talk about fear, how it holds them back, how it paralyzes them, how it keeps them from taking the leap. But I'll let you in on a secret. Most people aren't stuck because they're scared. They're stuck because they're comfortable. And comfort is a far more dangerous trap than fear will ever be. Fear at least wakes you up. It gets your adrenaline going. It makes you alert. But comfort slowly lulls you into sleep. It whispers, this is good enough. Don't risk it. Stay here. Why make it harder than it has to be? Comfort is that salary that shows up just in time to pay the bills, even though the job is draining your soul. It's the city you never really loved, but know like the back of your hand. It's the relationship that's not toxic, but not alive either. Comfort is that almost right life that keeps you from pursuing the one that would actually light you up. It's a velvet prison, and most people will live their entire lives inside of it because it's just cushioned enough not to hurt, but tight enough to keep you from growing. Here's what they don't tell you. Growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. You don't become exceptional by staying where it's easy. You don't get rich by doing what's obvious. You don't build freedom by choosing familiarity over risk. And the worst part, comfort gets addictive. The more you settle for good enough, the harder it becomes to even imagine anything beyond it. We convince ourselves we're being practical, that we're waiting for the right time, that we just need one more year. But what we're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of change, because change requires shedding your skin. It requires becoming someone new. And that's messy. It's awkward. It's humbling. You might look stupid. You might lose money. You might fail. But you also might unlock the version of yourself that doesn't settle, that doesn't need to ask for raises, that doesn't get drained every Monday morning. I want you to think about this. When's the last time you voluntarily did something uncomfortable? Not because you were forced to, but because you chose it. When's the last time you made yourself the beginner again? The reason that question is hard to answer for most people is because we've been trained to believe comfort equals success. But that's a lie. Comfort equals average, and average is the enemy of greatness. I'm not saying you need to burn everything down and start from scratch tomorrow, but I am saying you need to get really honest about where you've stopped evolving because it feels safe. That place, that project you haven't started, that business you haven't launched, that hard conversation you haven't had, that's the edge of your next level. That's where the real life begins. And here's the irony. The longer you cling to comfort, the more uncomfortable your life becomes. Because deep down, you know you're not living at your full potential. You know there's more inside of you. And that quiet knowing, that's where the resentment creeps in. That's where the anxiety builds. You start questioning everything because you betrayed your own curiosity. You traded your ambition for predictability. But it doesn't have to stay that way, because discomfort, it's actually a compass. It points to the things worth doing. You don't feel discomfort when you're scrolling social media or hitting snooze. You feel it when you're about to launch, speak, ask, move, build, or try. And that feeling, that edge, that's where the gold is. That's where the freedom lives. Not in avoiding discomfort, but in walking right into it again and again, until it becomes normal, until you realize that the people you admire aren't braver, smarter, or luckier. They're just more willing to get uncomfortable. So if you're stuck right now, stop asking yourself what you're afraid of. Start asking yourself what you're too comfortable with, because that's the real trap. And unless you're willing to break that belief, You'll spend your life calling it good enough when you are capable of so much more. The longer you stay comfortable, the longer you stay stuck. Everyone's talking about scarcity these days. Scarce jobs, scarce opportunities, scarce capital, scarce time. And that belief, it keeps you small, it keeps you scared, it keeps you exactly where they want you. Grateful for breadcrumbs and hesitant to claim more. But let me tell you, the truth they won't. Scarcity is a scam. It's not real. It's an illusion that's been marketed to you by people who benefit from your compliance. Because if you believe there's not enough to go around, you'll never take your shot. You'll stay in line. You'll wait for your turn. You'll shrink your dreams just enough to make them fit inside someone else's limitations. The thing is, the moment you realize that abundance isn't found, it's built, you start playing a completely different game. The people who are winning didn't stumble into some magical pool of wealth or freedom. They created it. They looked at the same playing field you're looking at, and instead of saying there's not enough, they said, where's the inefficiency? What's the edge? Where can I build what's missing? That shift alone, it changes everything. Abundance doesn't mean some fairy tale life where everything's perfect. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mindset where you no longer view opportunity as finite. You understand that value can be created, it can be discovered, it can be repackaged, repositioned, reframed, and that when you do that, you literally manufacture your own wealth. That's how arbitrage works. Arbitrage is just a fancy word for spotting what others don't and moving faster than the people stuck in the scarcity loop. But most people never get there because they're trained to compete, trained to believe life is a zero-sum game. If someone else wins, it must mean they lose. If someone else is rich, it must mean they got lucky, or inherited it, or cheated, or took something from someone else. So they focus on competing instead of creating. But here's the secret. When you switch from competition to creation, you stop needing permission. You stop chasing the same tired jobs, the same predictable plays, the same secure paths that have no upside left. You find your edge. You create your own category. And that's where abundance lives, not in the crowd, but in the gap. The problem is our brains are wired for scarcity. Evolution favored the cautious, the protective, the ones who hoarded. That wiring is still there, but it doesn't serve you in a world of exponential possibility. We don't live in a hunter-gatherer society anymore. We live in a world where attention is currency, where skills are scalable, and where your ability to move fast and solve problems is more valuable than the degrees hanging on your wall. So when I say you need to kill the belief in scarcity, I mean you need to root it out everywhere, in your thoughts, your language, your decisions. Stop saying things like, I can't afford that. Start asking, how could I afford that if I really wanted to? Stop saying, there aren't enough opportunities. Start asking, where's the inefficiency everyone else is too blind to notice? Stop saying, I don't have time. Start owning the hours you waste and repurposing them like your future depends on it, because it does. Abundance is not a passive state. It's a discipline. It's something you build day by day, brick by brick, with the choices you make. It requires risk, yes. It requires discomfort, absolutely. But it also gives you something that no amount of comfort ever could. Freedom. Freedom to think differently, freedom to earn differently, freedom to live on your own terms. People will call you crazy. They'll say you're being reckless. They'll say be realistic, but that's because they're scared. Scarcity is comfortable. Scarcity is safe. It gives you someone else to blame when things don't work. But abundance demands responsibility. It demands creativity. It demands that you stop asking, what's the minimum I can survive with? And start asking, what's the maximum I'm capable of creating? And that question, that's the one that separates the stuck from the free.